Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of you, and peace out to the rest of you. Hit the share button because the message is more important than the message. Passport Pookies probably were bound to go to the Dominican Republic because of its proximity and the availability of cheap flights certain times of the year to the Dominican Republic from the U.S., especially probably from New Jersey and Florida. Keep this in mind that in some areas it was probably inevitable. But as with all problems that are major one day when they were minor to non-existent at some time before, the growth occurs because they're not identified as problems, and the potential for growth is underestimated when they are identified. Who would have thought that we would have had this gender conflict we have going on now? Who would have thought in our grandparents' time that for some demographics the divorce rate would be higher than the marriage rate? You might ask how that's possible, and I would too, but who would have thought again that, who would have thought that was even possible? Somehow it became possible. Who would have thought 30 years ago that we would find out that men are producing less testosterone than previous generations in the same age, and that hardly any women would be virgins, and yet most men will be having too little sex, and around a third will be having none? Who would have thought this? Well, these problems were all seen beforehand in a smaller form and underestimated. Now look at them. Now we're seeing an issue with Passport Pookies, and I listened to Pablo Freshcobar, shout out to him, and he relayed from Carlos Red, shout out to him, that even as far away as Tanzania, Passport Pookies are messing things up. And granted, I do believe that you should not accept to have to pay more for the same thing even abroad. You should not. But let's say that it's considered unfair for you to try to smash and dash as cheaply as a local man with the local earnings in these third world nations with third world economies and third world salaries. Then it makes sense that these women would do more for you than they would do for these men because they're demanding more from you. So even if you say, well, I'm not going to accept having to do more, that's fine. You also would have to say that you're not going to ask for more. That's fair. But these Passport Pookies apparently are not playing fair. And mind you, this is coming from a man that does not justify fornication. So what's going on here? These men are ruining the reputations of black Americans. That's unacceptable. And I think a law that where I live is very sexually conservative. But it's not going to be this way forever. And I'll be damned if I come here and identify myself as African American to someone and I get ill-treated because of it, and it's not because of what white folks told them, but rather because of what they were able to see firsthand. Oh, one of your men came and didn't want to pay any dowry to get married to my daughter. Well, your dowries are ridiculous, but if he was trying to not get paid any dowry at all, that's also ridiculous. My reply would be, both of y'all are ridiculous. Because you probably want hundreds of thousands. That's not even a short of a dowry. And he probably was trying to get you to pay him the dowry, and that's also against the shorty. So you know what? You both really deserve each other. I've said this before. There was a time when African Americans and Pakistanis, just within the Muslim communities in America, and I say communities with an IES at the end because of this, were always at each other's throats. And I said, instead in a recording and uploaded, that frankly, you two deserve each other. What's the reason? You both got the same bad habits. You just don't like each other. African Americans and Pakistanis. You interrupt people who are about to teach you valuable information because you think you know everything. You put your culture above the religion, and you put your ancestors above Allah. African Americans, your hygiene is all over the spectrum, from the cleanest to the most trifling, but your diet sucks. Pakistanis, your diet is all over the spectrum, from the healthiest to the unhealthiest, but your hygiene sucks. I mean, with respect to the diet. I don't mean that they don't bathe at all, but when it comes to, like for instance, there's a ruling you're not supposed to eat garlic or onions uncooked and then go to the masjid. Guess what? They do it. I know, it happens here all the time. Where I live, they're really bad about it. Go to the masjid stinking routinely. So we all suck in the long run. But I'll be damned if I'm going to come here and people now looking at me like I'm just on the hunt for some cheap punani, but don't want to deal with the consequences of cheap punani. And that's how they're viewing me, even though I've never been that way. Passport pookies are messing things up for passport gentlemen. And I don't want us to underestimate that danger either. Just like I said yesterday, I don't want us to underestimate the danger of the false accusations of the hyenas, because their reputation may be ruined, but you still don't want them to be able to ruin your reputation. And guess what? Passport pookies, most of them, still have the sense and the morality to not be a danger to kids. Most of them have good sense. But guess what else, though? They're still the perfect cover for those who do. See, here's why. Passport pookies are bringing in the matriarchal mindset. They're bringing in these ideas that because they're American, they're special, even legally. They don't have to do anything the way the locals do because they're American. They can shake things up, that's fine, because they're American. That's the matriarchal idea and the matriarchal understanding of other countries. That's why Boom Shika, Bonquisha, and Sophista Ratchet Sapphire go down to Jamaica and they twerk on camera. Rafting down the Black River, twerking on camera, on camera, proud of it, completely unaware that when that camera goes off, one of the local men pushing those rafts might give in to temptation and swing those paddles at the ladies, knock them into the river, and let the crocodiles tear them up. If that's the river I'm thinking of. Probably no crocodiles in that one. But there are crocs in Jamaica. And you just don't want a situation in which they wind up being eaten by crocs because they did something dumb and some of the locals said, we're tired of this mess being brought here. No, 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 not today. They think they can do this as matriarchs because they're American. Passport pookies learn a lot of things and a lot of their understanding from the matriarchs, from the hyenocrats. And guess what that leads to? Going to third world nations, thinking they special because they're American, they got swag and game, and the locals don't know nothing about that, and they just gonna blindside them and get over. And they don't realize that they're being shunned because of it. They're not there long enough to realize they're being shunned. That's all that is. So, when they go there, matriarchs that are sitting up falsely accusing us passport holding gentlemen, I mean I'm SYSBM, but those of us who hold passports and mean no harm are being falsely accused of the most unspeakable horrid crimes by any human standards. And these ladies that are saying this right now know they're lying, but there's going to come a generation or an age group underneath them that will really believe it because they hear from these matriarchs. Next age group to come along and say this stuff is going to really believe it. Well, understand this. That whole demographic, both age groups are the ones that are raising these pookies. Passport pookies are not. And when these passport pookies hear this, they hear the matriarchs saying this stuff in their homes, they're going to think, oh, okay, well, most of my homies, even though they pookies, they ain't like that. But the one that is sick, that sick, is going to think, well, I can have my partners as cover for when I go and do it. Because we're going to all be turning up so much. While they turning up, they ain't going to know that I just grabbed a victim. That's how it's going to go. So they become the cover for those who are even worse than they are. Much the same way that the passport pookie is using black gentlemen who hold passports as the cover for what they are. We're the reason they get in without a problem. They're the reason we may get kicked out. And we're not going to have that. So, those of us who already are abroad and established need to start inviting others abroad based on character. Can you refer them as good characters? Invite them. Help them to adjust and separate them from the regular run-of-the-mill tourist. That's important to understand. Because straight up, I will mess around. If these passport pookies are allowed to soil our reputation, I will turn around and pass myself off as a non-ADOS that got naturalized as a U.S. citizen. And that's what I'm going to do. While still advocating and defending the actual gentlemen who hold passports. Why would I do that? It's not to sell the ADOS down the river. It would be because if I am supposedly not ADOS in the eyes of the locals, but I'm defending the gentleman, then it has more weight than if I am ADOS and they know it and I'm defending the gentleman. Oh, well, he's going to say that because he's ADOS. Oh, no, he's a Belizean who became naturalized as an American. Okay. See, he's defending the gentleman amongst the ADOS and the gentleman amongst the Nigerians who also get a bad rep because of, their Pookies, the Igbos. Yeah, I said it. Even Igbos who ain't the Pookies get a bad rep for that. Even they got to suffer. I'll be able to, but by passing myself off as neither one of the two, I'd be able to better defend them and state, well, no, actually, they're coming in two different demographics. One use the other one as a cover. And the way to get to know them or to tell them apart takes about 15 minutes. You just got to be fluent in English. Talk to them about HBCUs. Talk to them about ESL. If they paid attention in English class, they know the parts of speech and grammar, and they can give you a few pointers. If they didn't pay attention in English class, they're anti-intellectuals. Don't trust them. Even if that's a gentleman, he was an anti-intellectual. How would you know that he's a gentleman? You can't tell. So steer clear of him too to be safe. That's how I'd have to explain it. Because, see, the thing about the hallmark of the Pookies is that, well, it's low self-discipline and anti-intellectualism. I don't care if you find one that is a da'i, and that means he is a preacher of my religion. If he has anti-intellectualism in the least bit, that's a form of low self-discipline. All the prayers at night, never fornicating, and working 2 jobs to take care of 2 wives, but he is anti-education, that's the Pookie. He's just not an evil Pookie. I know. I've dealt with one. I tried to suggest some changes to his literature. Do people know what I mean? This is grassroots. We don't need to do all of that. No punctuation. Straight run-on sentences. Okay, all right. Well, your message, you mean well. We actually have the same message, but guess what? You undermined yours because you failed the Malcolm X standard. Don't call him your hero. So that being said, I think I've covered enough about that. I want to say something about game versus money and these broad submission. I understand why different people have different stances in this debate. Now, SWP is the only one with whom I mostly disagree because he believes, or he has stated, that if we just got more money and more power that they would submit. I already know firsthand that's not true. I know that it's not the case. It is absolutely not the case. You get more money and more power and they will sell you out. As a matter of fact, they'll stop you from doing things that would get you more money and more power. Especially if you give them an order. They'll go against it. Defiance of black men is hardwired into the culture. Just like game and finesse is hardwired and Pookies follow it. Defiance of black men is hardwired. I know. First hand, I'm not going to go into it. But what I will say is this. The role of money, as far as the Western black woman is concerned, and the Western white woman is similar to her own man in this regard. But that's another story. is that, see, the role of money is like a degree in a job market. If you don't have a degree in the job market, yes, that will be held against you, the degree you don't have. But if you have it, it will not count for you. That's what money's like for you. Game? Well, game is something that the women made up. Charm is different, but game and swag are things that the women made up so that they could point to these things and tell men who met the standards that the women did explain explicitly that they had, that they were still missing. Well, there's still something else you don't have. Well, what is that? Game. Oh. Because see, on the surface, saying game and swag, because they are in fact words, they're just ambiguous in meaning. Well, they still beat just saying umph, which is not a word at all. It's just a sound. So, gentlemen, don't entertain for 1 second that there's anything you could have done differently for the sisters to respect and cooperate, let alone submit more. Don't entertain that notion. Thanks for listening. Black heart, black mind, blackout, assalamu alaikum, and black, heterosexual, non-select male power because they don't like in a black patriarchy until extinction or judgment day.